Sir, what time are we starting?
I don't know how many. We have already 12 participants, so we can start at 7 o'clock.
Oh, can we start?
Okay, we'll be ready.
I'll just start the record.
Okay, fine, great. Good evening, everybody. I think we will start today. We will have discussion on echocardiography. It will have two portions. First, I will tell you something about the use of echo in the detection of intracardiac masses. After that, I will show you a number of few echocardiographic clippings, and you can make the diagnosis, and we can discuss those clippings. So, initial discussion will be about intracardiac masses. Is my slide visible to you? Hello, students?
Yes, it's visible, sir.
Yeah, okay. So we will start with intracardiac masses, echocardiographic assessment. What are the intracardiac masses that you usually come across? In your experience, what are the intracardiac masses that you have come across when you are doing an echo? Any one of you?
Thrombus is the most
common. Thrombus is the commonest. Very good. Yes. Then what else? Tumors. Yes, very good. What else? Vegetation. Yeah. What did you say?
Pulmonary embolism.
No, that is thrombus. Thrombus in cardiac cavities, right atrium, right ventricle, they can get dislodged and can go to the pulmonary artery and cause pulmonary embolism, infarction. Vegetations, very good. In infective endocarditis, vegetations. What else? Anything else?
The pacemaker leads.
Very good. Pacemaker leads, prosthetic material, which includes pacemaker leads, leadless pacemakers. All these can form intracardiac masses. Yes. What else? Sometimes normal structures, which if they are hypertrophied or prominent, can mimic a intracardiac mass. Like, beg your pardon?
Crista terminalis
is very good. Excellent. Yes. What else? Eustachian valve.
Papillary muscle sometimes can cause.
Papillary muscle sometimes can confuse you. Very good. Yes.
Moderator band.
Yes. There are a number of normal structures which can sometimes simulate a tumor. And of course, there are some miscellaneous causes for intracardiac masses also. So let's go to the discussion. Intracardiac mass is an abnormal structure within the heart. The intracardiac masses can be tumors, thrombus, vegetation, sometimes granulomas. Tuberculous granuloma can sometimes represent normal cardiac structures which can mimic a mass, and sometimes there can be an ultrasound artifact. Let us look at the tumors, primary tumors. Primary tumors of the heart is much less common compared to secondary tumors. Mostly, primary tumors are benign. Myxoma is the commonest primary tumor. Other tumors which can be detected in the heart are sometimes lipomas, papillary fibroelastomas, hemangiomas, rhabdomyomas, mesothelioma of the AV node. These are all some of the primary tumors of the heart which have been described. Out of which commonest is myxoma. Almost 1/3 to 40% of all primary tumors of the heart is in the left atrium. Left atrial myxoma. How do you diagnose a mass in the left atrium as left atrial myxoma? What are the features? Any one of you? Can anyone of you try that? What are the features which will make you diagnose that this could be a myxoma? Any one of you? Ramesh, are you there? From Lilavati? Radhakrishnan?
So pedunculated masses.
Yeah.
Pedicle.
Yeah, there will be the left atrial myxomas are pedunculated. Where are they attached to? What is the site of attachment of this pedicle of the left atrial myxoma?
So at the septal site.
It is on the
septum.
Oh, yeah, it is in the septum. Can you be a little more precise? It is in and around the region of the fossa ovalis. That is the common site. In and around the region of the fossa ovalis on the left atrial side. Yes, very good. Yeah. So it is attached to the endotracheal septum, mostly in and around the fossa ovalis on the left atrial. This is an example of a left atrial myxoma. Can you describe the features which will make you diagnose that this is a classical left atrial myxoma? The other features which will make you diagnose are myxomas can have areas of calcification. Can you see areas of calcification here? Can you all see areas of calcification?
Yes, sir.
So this is an area of calcification. And side by side, you can see areas of rarefaction. Calcification and rarefaction also seen. And most of the times, the mass can be quite fragmented with a lot of fingers projecting out. And if you're very careful, sometimes you may be able to pick out the the pedicle. Here you can see the pedicle which is attached to the inradial septum. Can you see the pedicle here? The pedicle is attached to the inradial septum. So the left atrial myxoma is the commonest intracardiac primary tumor. Common site is left atrium to the left atrial side of the inradial septum in and around the fossa ovalis. And the mass as such has got areas of calcification and rarefaction. And usually the pedungulated mass moves freely and it falls onto the mitral valve during diastole and is pushed back into the left atrium during systole. This is an example of left atrial myxoma. Myxomas can have different sizes and shapes. Another example of left atrial myxoma. This is quite elongated. You can see some areas of calcification here, and there is some area of rarefaction, but it is quite elongated. But this also is attached to the inner atrial septum. So the myxomas can vary in shape, in size, but still most of them is attached to the inner atrial septum. Another instance of a left atrial myxoma. Can you see the myxoma here? Very faint. Very faint. This is also a very obese lady, and we just detected something in the left atrium. Patient had recurrent episodes of disease and respiratory symptoms for the past 6 months. And an echocardiogram showed this picture. And what can you do to make it more clear?
MRI, sir.
You will
MRI.
not go for MRI. MRI, of course, can help you. But you can always transesophageal echo.
Transesophageal echo.
Because see, anything in the posterior part of the heart, which is especially in the left atrium, which is difficult to visualize in a very obese, thick-walled person, I think the best approach is to do a transesophageal echo. So in this patient, when we did a transesophageal echo, you can see a large mass here. Can you see the large mass here? Which was very, very faint and very difficult to appreciate. But the mass is very huge. It is almost filling half of the left atrium, and this turned out to be a large left atrial myxoma. So when you are in doubt that the mass is not very clear, especially in a thick-walled person, I think you should always opt for transesophageal echo. Now, sometimes the diagnosis of the left atrial myxoma can be made looking at the M-mode echo. Can anyone of you describe what is here? What are you seeing here? Nowadays, the use of M-mode echo has come down so much that students do not know what they are looking at and whether they can make a proper diagnosis.
Sir, this is the parasternal long axis view, M-mode. And so from above the first right ventricle.
Yes.
Then right walls.
Yes. Very good.
And then say in the mitral. Then in the left atrial.
Yes, very good. What is this? What is this?
So connecting the two left.
What are you seeing there? What is it that you are seeing there? Anybody would like to give a comment? This is in which phase are you seeing this?
Sir, during the systole, there is some.
This is
during the systole, there is some tissue stuck. And
this actually is the during systole. What is happening to the left atrial myxoma? Is thrown into the.
Sir, it is thrown into the towards the LV cavity, causing the obstruction.
That is during diastole. During systole.
Sorry, sir.
Systole, what happens? For the left atrial myxoma, what happens during systole?
So the mitral valve closes and enter the LA.
And so the tumor mass which just dropped onto the mitral valve during diastole is thrown back into the left atrium. And the shadow of the mass coming into the left atrium is seen in the M-mode echo. When you're doing an M-mode echo, you are getting the aorta, the right ventricle, the aorta, and the left atrium. And during diastole, the left atrial myxoma, which falls into the left atrium, throws a shadow. That is what you are seeing here. So this, if you are seeing an M-mode echo with a shadow like this during the systolic phase, this is systolic phase. You can see by looking at the electrocardiogram. This is the systolic phase. You can diagnose in the 2D echo of this patient. This is the picture, 2D picture of that patient. You can see a large mass in the left atrium, and you can see this is actually fragmented, but this is attached to the inner atrial septum. And what are the problems of left atrial myxoma? Anyone of you? What is the problem?
One is, sir, it can cause obstruction, like in this.
Very good.
Patient,
it can cause mostly left atrial myxoma can cause fall onto the mitral valve, can cause intermittent mitral valve obstruction, and sometimes these patients can have syncope based on sometimes in a particular position. when they just turn to one side, or when they lie down from the sitting position, or sometimes when they say the thrombus, the tumor can obstruct the mitral valve and can give rise to sometimes a transient loss of consciousness. Very good. Yes. what else?
Emboli.
Embolization, excellent, very good. Now they are fragmented. Actually, they're friable and fragmented, and this friable tissue sometimes can get dislodged and give rise to embolism. And since this is on the left side, the embolism can go to the brain and can give rise to stroke. Yes, what else? It may sometimes simulate the infective endocarditis, give rise to fever, and sometimes can be a high ESR also. So sometimes it may simulate infective endocarditis, but we are more worried because of the obstruction to the mitral valve and the embolic episode. So, and what is the
You
treatment?
have to resect it.
Yeah, you have to
Resect.
surgically removed. It has to be surgically removed. What are the problems of surgical removal of the left atrial myxoma?
May reoccur,
It
sir.
may reoccur. There's a recurrence. What is the percentage of recurrence?
Sir,
What is the percentage of patients having a recurrence of left atrial myxoma after it has been resected?
5 to 15%.
5 to 10%. No, not 5 to 15. 5 to 10% of patients there can be recurrence of left atrial myxoma, especially if the surgeon has left a small bit of it. The surgeon has taken. Actually, nowadays, what the surgeon does is the intraatrial septum to which the tumor, the pedicle is attached, that also is removed, and then that is repaired, so that there is the myxoma, it can recur, and the myxomas can have. It can occur in other sites also, especially a patient with a left atrial myxoma can have a myxoma of the right atrium. So it's extremely important to carefully look for any evidence of myxoma in the right atrium also. The another site, the uncommon site for left atrial myxoma is anterior mitral leaflet. See, this is a uncommon myxoma on the anterior mitral leaflet. And you can here also you can see areas of calcification, some areas of rarefaction, but it is a little bit uniform. Mostly the myxomas are fragmented and irregular and friable, irregular, but here you are seeing more uniform. It is attached to an uncommon site to the anterior mitral leaflet. So it's operated and was a case of it was a myxoma. So myxomas can be at unusual sites also. Atrium, followed by right atrium, followed by left ventricle, and followed by right ventricle. That is the way in which the frequency of occurrence of myxoma. Left atrium, right atrium, left ventricle, right ventricle. Sometimes myxoma can occur in right atrium also, and when it occurs in right atrium, it can sometimes hit on the AV node, and sometimes can give rise to AV conduction problems. Sometimes these patients can go for junctional tachycardia, or they may even sometimes go for complete AV block, especially if the hitting against the AV node. So the right atrial myxoma may be associated with conduction abnormalities. So myxoma, commonest primary cardiac tumor. Commonest site is left atrium. Most often it is a single tumor, but 5% can be multiple. It has got an irregular shape, which is described as grape cluster. We have seen most of the left atrium, the myxomas are quite irregular, but there are some which can have a smooth shape also. They are not homogeneous, means there are areas of dense calcification. There can be areas of degeneration, and that is why they are classically pedangulated and freely mobile. Another important mass inside the heart is papillary fibroelastoma. What is it? Anybody would like to give a comment? What is papillary fibroelastoma?
So these are also the benign tumors.
Yeah, benign tumor. Yes.
And usually involve the
Very
valves.
good. It is in relation to the valves. Very good. Excellent.
So usually
They are finger-like, sir, and
Most
most
common
common
site
site
is
is aortic valve.
The next is aortic valve. Okay, then what else? How will you differentiate it from infective endocarditis vegetation? The infective endocarditis vegetations mostly are seen in the upstream of the valve, while papillary fibroelastoma is seen on the downstream. For example, if there is a vegetation on the mitral valve, mostly it is seen on the left atrial side of the mitral valve. That is an upstream, while papillary fibroelastoma will be seen on the ventricular side. Similarly, when there is a papillary fibroelastoma of the aortic valve, these are the two common sites, that will be seen on the aortic side of the aortic valve. While when you look at infective endocarditis, they are usually seen on the upstream side, thereby meaning that if it is a mitral valve vegetation, it is seen on the left atrial side, while if it is an aortic valve vegetation, which is seen on the ventricular side. Okay, now let's look at one or two. Be very careful. We can see. Can you see here something here? Can you see something which is fluttering here? also with great difficulty, but we can here you can easily see. Can you see that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. What is the problem of papillary fibroelastoma? Why are you worried?
Again, sir, it can emboli.
No, it does not embolize.
Sir,
Actually,
it may be site for thrombus
very
formation.
good. Why it is a site for thrombus formation? Anyone of you? Because in the papillary fibroelastoma, the surface is quite irregular and there are crypts. And the blood can get into these crypts and there can be a thrombus formation on the surface of the papillary fibroelastoma. And these can get dislodged and can embolize. Need not always happen. Most of the times, papillary fibroelastoma, there is a risk of embolization. In that case, whether either you have to remove it or the patient has to be orally anticoagulated. The tumor usually does not embolize. It is the thrombus which is formed in the crypts and on the surface of the embolus, the surface of the tumor, which can embolize and can give rise to the catastrophic stroke. Sometimes it can be on the aortic valve also. You can see that this is attached to there is a pedicle and it's attached with the pedicle to the root of the aortic valve. You can see the pedicle here. You can see the mass here. You can see the pedicle in a three-dimensional view. And this is attached to the root of the aortic valve and onto the aortic side of the mitral valve. Here, now it is on the aortic side of the aortic valve. So that is what I was telling. The papillary fibroelastomas are seen on the downstream side of the blood flow, while the vegetations are seen on the upstream side, thereby meaning the vegetations are seen on the left atrial side of the mitral valve and ventricular side of the aortic valve, while papillary fibroelastomas are seen on the LV side of the mitral valve and aortic side of the aortic valve. So this is another case of tumors. Does not give rise to any obstruction. By itself does not grow too much, but it can cause thrombus formation and this thrombus can embolize. This is an unusual site, an unusual structure of the papillary fibroelastoma, which actually was surgically proved. Otherwise, it's very difficult to diagnose papillary fibroelastoma because it is something like a cyst. You can see a cyst which is attached onto the downstream, upstream side of the, and you can see the mass here also. And of course, that can be clearly seen in the cardiac MRI. The mass is clearly seen. And the person wanted it to be removed, and it was surgically removed, and the histopathology proved that it is a papillary fibroelastoma. So the papillary fibroelastoma can be considered as the second commonest tumor. It simulates an infective seen in relation to the valves, mostly mitral valve and also aortic valve. They are seen on the downstream side of the valve, unlike in infective endocarditis vegetations, which are seen on the upstream side of the valve. The problem with the papillary fibroelastoma is that it can form thrombi surrounding it, and it can get embolized, resulting in infarction. Especially if it goes to brain, it can result in a stroke. So cardiac tumors, papillary fibroelastoma, they are seen in relation to valves, most often in relation to mitral valve. It can simulate the vegetation. Unlike infective endocarditis, downstream side of the valve, mostly no symptoms and they are harmless. Rarely superimposed thrombus formation and embolization can happen. If that happens, then these patients require oral anticoagulation. Is that clear about papillary fibroelastoma? It is probably the second commonest primary tumor of the heart, which is a benign tumor. Any doubts about papillary fibroelastoma?
Sir,
We'll go to
in
the
which cases there is definitive surgery required in the fibroelastoma?
Actually, just by recognizing just by recognizing the fibroelastoma, there is no indication for immediate surgery because by itself it does not damage the valve, it does not obstruct the flow. Usually, it does not give rise to problems. But in a very rare instance, it can cause thrombus surrounding the mass, and that can embolize. The patient indication for oral anticoagulation. If the patient's oral anticoagulation abolishes the embolic episodes, then I think that should be enough. But if the patient still grows an embolus, then there is an indication for surgical removal. So just because you are seeing that, you need not immediately remove it surgically because they usually do not develop malignancy. They do not develop into a large mass. But there is a small risk of an embolic episode which could be guarded, and if required, it can be surgically removed. If the patient is very much worried about the risk of the surgical removal, it's an option. Any other doubt? Okay, we'll go to next one. Lipoma. Lipoma is another tumor which can develop inside the heart. Mostly it is a benign tumor. And here is an example of a patient with lipoma in the RV outflow region. the pedungulated mass. You can see that there is a pedungulated mass in the RV outflow, and this was surgically removed, and it turned out to be a lipoma. Lipoma, unlike myxomas, they are quite regular, highly echogenic, and there is usually there is no it is not friable and fragmented. It's very smooth and it's highly echogenic. That is how you suspect that this could be a lipoma. Here is an example of a patient with a lipoma of the RV outflow. Another example of a lipoma of the right atrium. 36-year-old lady, vague history of palpitation, not suggestive of tachyarrhythmia, no other complaints. Clinical examination, there was no abnormality detected. ECG and X-ray chest were normal, and the professional diagnosis was anxiety state. But when you do the echo, you will be surprised that she has got huge mass. So you look at the size of the mass; it's almost filling right atrium. I would expect that this patient has got at least DVP should be elevated, because the right atrium is completely occupied by the tumor mass. And when you look at the tumor mass, you can see that it is highly echogenic, and it's also a smooth mass. So when you find a smooth mass, highly echogenic, always think of, especially if it is not in the left atrium, always think of a possibility of whether it could be a lipoma also. Lipoma is probably the third commonest benign tumor of the heart. The RA masses, sometimes it can be normal structures like eustachian valve, pacemaker wires, balloon or central line catheters. Sometimes there can be cysts, thrombi in the right atrium, tumors, sometimes giant intraatrial septal aneurysm, sometimes may be mistaken for an intracardiac mass, right atrial mass. And as somebody was telling, crista terminalis, sometimes it is hypertrophied and can simulate a mass in the right atrium. The primary tumor of the any cardiac tumor, the lipoma can occur in any cardiac tumor. It can be usually it is homogeneous, highly echogenic, and refractile. The differentiate that it is homogeneous and throughout it is highly echogenic. And usually it is a regular smooth mass. While left atrial myxoma is fragmented, friable, just got areas of calcification, areas of liquefaction. So it is heterogeneous. So homogeneous mass is a point of differentiation between myxoma and lipoma. Rhabdomyomas. Rhabdomyomas are another intracardiac tumor, which you frequently see in what age group? In
Children, very
children, in infants. In newborn babies, in infants, you can see rhabdomyomas. Can you describe the features of rhabdomyoma and what do you do for
usually
rhabdomyoma?
there are multiple tumors, sir.
Very good.
And they're more common in right
Excellent.
ventricle, and they
Yeah,
usually regress
very good.
by themselves.
Usually the rhabdomyomas regress by itself, and it is better to leave it alone unless
Causing some obstruction.
if the tumor is big in the outflow region and giving rise to significant obstruction, resulting in heart failure or impairment of the cardiac function, then you have to intervene. Otherwise, it is better to leave it alone, and rhabdomyomas usually regress by themselves. Maybe in 3 to 6 months' time, they sometimes even totally disappear. Another reason for interference is the patient is getting recurrent malignant ventricular arrhythmias. So malignant ventricular arrhythmias, that's another situation where something has to be done for rhabdomyomas. Otherwise, it's better to leave it without doing anything. And most of the time, reassure the parents. And most of the time, over a period of time, it spontaneously regresses and the patient completely recovers. Here's an example of a patient with rhabdomyoma on the right ventricle. You can see there are multiple, very often multiple, 2 or 3. You can see multiple rhabdomyomas. You see one here, one here, one here. At different sides, you can see multiple rhabdomyomas onto the right ventricular side. So the rhabdomyomas can be multiple, usually seen in newborns or in early infancy. If it is not giving rise to any significant outflow ventricular arrhythmias, it can be left alone and usually regresses by itself. The child can be on follow-up. And if there is a reason, especially if there is an outflow obstruction, then sometimes you may have to surgically remove it. Otherwise, it may interfere with cardiac function. So mostly it is a tumor which regresses by itself. Another example of a rhabdomyoma, you can see multiple tumors. This is seen on the left ventricle. One is here, and there's another one here. So multiple myocardial tumors. Sorry, rhabdomyoma. So multiple rhabdomyomas, and both the children totally disappeared on follow-up they became normal. So you don't have to worry to assure the parents, and over a period of time, it will gradually regress and can disappear. Rhabdomyomas newborn, multiple, mostly spontaneous regression. Treatment is required if there is outflow obstruction or malignant arrhythmias. Mostly if there is only if there is a significant outflow obstruction. That is the reason for interference in a patient with rhabdomyoma. Malignant tumors can be angiosarcomas, rhabdomyosarcoma rarely, mesothelioma, fibrosarcoma, and malignant lymphomas. Sometimes there can be cysts like pericardial cyst, bronchogenic cyst, or blood cyst, which can also be detected inside the heart. Let's look at some of the malignant tumors. RV sarcoma. Whenever you find a tumor in the RV outflow region, the chances are that it is RV malignant. Most of the times, RV outflow tumors are malignant, and chances of malignancy in an RV outflow tumor is thought to be as high as almost 70 to 100-fold compared to it being benign. So here you can see a mass in the RV outflow. This RV outflow region, you can see a huge mass here. It is completely filling the RV outflow, and this turned out to be a malignant mass. Another example of a 30-year-old male came with exertional breathlessness of 3 months. There was an ejection systolic murmur in the third and the second right intercostal space, and this was the echo picture. You can see that the whole RV outflow is totally occupied by the tumor mass. Usually, the RV outflow tumors are rapidly spreading, and here also this patient had rapid spread. Most likely, there must be a rapid spread because this patient died within a month of the detection of this. Most likely, it must be a malignant mass in the RV outflow, which might have resulted in his fatal outcome. So this is the commonest malignant tumor in the RV outflow is fibrosarcoma. Most commonly, it is fibrosarcoma, and sometimes you can have myxosarcoma also, but mostly it is fibrosarcoma. Another example, here is the story of a 12-year-old child who presented to the pediatric outpatient with ecchymosis. He was detected to have disseminated intravascular coagulopathy. At that time, no cause for DIC was detected, and his coagulation parameters became normal. 6 months later, the patient presented with exertional breathlessness and was detected to have an ejection systolic murmur in the pulmonary area. His APTT was prolonged and echocardiogram was done, which revealed a huge mass in the RV outflow. Can you see a huge mass in the RV outflow? Actually, it has got two pedicles. With two pedicles, it is attached to the RV outflow region and is falling in and out of the RV outflow. The big mass. Because of the symptom of consumption coagulopathy, we thought that the tumor mass must be active and maybe even malignant. So the child was investigated and was decided. This is the RV outflow obstruction. The velocity was peak velocity was 3.44 meters per second, and peak gradient 47.2. Significant obstruction at the RV outflow region. The tumor was surgically removed, and this is a huge tumor. You can see almost 5 centimeters in size, 5 centimeters in length, and maybe another 3 centimeters in width. The huge mass was removed. There are 2 pedicles, one here and one here, just like that we saw in the echocardiogram. The histopathology, I don't think I should worry too much about it. Interestingly, most interesting thing was that this turned out to be a low-grade leiomyosarcoma. That's most important. Can somebody themselves? Hello? Hello? Somebody's surrounding noise is coming in. Can somebody mute somebody who's surrounding noise is coming and interfering? Okay, fine, great. So this is a low-grade leiomyosarcoma. So it actually turned out to be a malignant tumor. So malignancy, whenever you see a RV outflow mass, you must always think that this could be a malignant tumor. The sarcomas, outflow tumors. Here, it turned out to be leiomyosarcoma, which is exceptionally rare, almost unheard of. Follow-up of the case, following surgery, all the coagulant parameters became normal, and we have got a follow-up up to 10 years. The patient is doing well with no recurrence of tumor or coagulopathy. I think it's lucky enough that the tumor removal completely removed. It was locally malignant, maybe most likely, and he became perfectly normal. Another example of an RV outflow mass, which is a myxosarcoma. You can see it's a huge mass. This is an RV outflow. It's a huge mass with areas of liquefaction. You must always suspect that it is a malignant tumor. So here you can see that it is areas of liquefaction, large tumor, and it turned out to be, when it was removed, it turned out to be a myxosarcoma. So myxoma can also develop into a malignant tumor, myxosarcoma. Whenever you find that tumor mass is huge and there are areas of liquefaction, always think of the possibility of a malignant tumor. And here is a tumor in the RV outflow region, which is malignant myxosarcoma. One or two points about the RV outflow tumors. RV outflow tumors are rare. Outflow tumors are 70 to 140 times more likely to be malignant than benign. That's the most important point you should remember. That RV outflow tumors, unlike the tumors in other sites, is most likely to be malignant. 70 to 140 times more likely to be malignant than benign. So whenever you detect an RV outflow tumor, an immediate intervention is required. If it is a primary cardiac tumor, it is approximately 2 times more likely to be sarcoma than a myxoma. So the sarcomas are more common than myxomas in the RV outflow region. So this is very important. Likely, much more likely to be malignant than being benign. Almost 70 to 140 times, very high incident, high likelihood of the tumor being malignant. That's a very important point you should remember. And whenever you see a patient with an RV outflow tumor, always consider that it is malignant unless it is proved otherwise. Pericardial sarcoma, another example, and pericardium is another region where there can be malignant tumors. Mostly pericardial malignancy is a secondary malignancy, deposition of the tumor mass into the pericardium, which that is a very common presentation of secondaries in the heart. Pericardium is a very common site for secondaries in the heart, and they present with hemorrhagic pericardial effusion, rapid hemorrhagic pericardial effusion, cardiac tamponade. That's the usual presentation. Sometimes there can be primary tumors of the pericardium and pericardium. The story of a 26-year-old male, no significant past history. On 18th June 2016, came with shortness of breath. By 20th, he was admitted to a nursing home and felt better with some symptomatic treatment. He was discharged quickly, and after a few days, he stopped all treatment and he started having fever. He was given anti-tuberculous treatment. He was admitted again a month later, almost 2 weeks later, due to significant dyspnea and atypical chest pain. X-ray just showed cardiomegaly and echo was done. And this is what echo showed. You can see this is a mass in the pericardium. This is the pericardium. It is pushing the heart to one side. This is the right ventricle, right atrium. This is the left ventricle, left atrium. The whole mass is pushing the heart to one side. And you can see areas of degeneration. An irregular mass with areas of degeneration. Whenever you find such large mass with areas of degeneration, always think of malignancy. It is malignancy where the tumor can rapidly grow. And when it grows, there will be areas of liquefaction, degeneration, and it may appear like a cyst. So the areas of liquefaction with a large mass is a feature which should make you suspect this tumor was malignant. You can see here also a huge mass which is pushing the heart to one side. Same thing. This is the heart is on this side. It is on the right hand to the anterior to the cardiac chamber, the huge mass. You can see that areas of degeneration. That's the most important point when you are looking for malignant features of malignancy. Here you can see areas of degeneration, which is highly suggestive, and this is a rapidly growing tumor and is very active. And this is a mass in the pericardium, and there was associated pericardial effusion also. Of course, ECG showed low voltage complexes, large mass, large spherical, large mass in the pericardium. Histopathology showed spindle cell sarcoma, and the spindle cell sarcomas are rare, but they are very malignant. This patient also had very rapidly growing malignancy, and patients succumbed to it. The possible treatment option would have been to give a chemotherapy, radiation to reduce the size of the tumor mass, and then do a complete resection. So even though the primary tumors are the tumors, commonest site for a malignant tumor in the heart is RV outflow region. You can get malignant tumors in the pericardium also primary. The commonest benign primary tumor of the heart is myxoma, and the commonest site is left atrium. Nothing special about that. Pericardial tumors are extremely rare. The primary malignant tumors are very uncommon. Metastatic is the most common. 10 to 12% of all malignancies can metastasize. Primary tumors are rare and they are mostly benign. It can be lipoma, fibroma, or hemangioma. When it becomes when considering a malignant tumor of the pericardium, it can be sarcoma, mesothelioma, or lymphoma. Metastasis is the commonest tumor in the pericardium, and they usually present with pericardial hemorrhagic pericardial effusion, cardiac tamponade. So these are the common primary tumors which can metastasize into the heart. Can be tumor, the primary tumor can be in the lung. It is 20 times more common than primary tumors. Secondary tumors of the heart is almost 20 times more common than primary tumors. The primary sites of a secondary tumor in the heart can be lung, lymphoma, breast, leukemia, stomach, melanoma, liver, and colon. They are mostly present as cardiac tamponade due to pericardial involvement. Myocardial involvement is less common. Renal cell carcinoma can spread through inferior vena cava to the right atrium and even into the right ventricle. So whenever you find any mass in the right atrium, seems to be spreading from the IVC, you must track it through the IVC renal veins. When it is reaching the region of the renal veins, it obviously means that it is a malignant mass which has come from the renal veins through the IVC into the right atrium. Okay, now we are going to thrombus. Any doubts about the cardiac tumors? Any points you want to raise? Anybody would like to ask any doubts, any questions about the about the primary tumors of the heart. All clear? Okay, then we'll go to thrombus. How will you suspect that this a mass is a thrombus? Reasons. Whenever you see a mass, how will you suspect that this could be a thrombus? Any one of you?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Thrombus will be associated with
Speak to the mic.
normality.
Yes, there is it can be in the region of a akinesia where there is a stagnation of blood or a slowing of the blood. Yes, very good.
Second point is, sir, there won't be any pedicle
Yeah,
in thrombus.
usually it is a sessile tumor, not a pedunculated tumor. A pedunculated mass. Yes, very good.
Sir, I don't know much about
Beg your pardon?
that's it, sir. I can't remember any.
Okay, anybody else? Navjot, would you like to make any comment?
So same only, sir.
Okay, there are many features we see. A mass can be diagnosed as a thrombus in the following situations. One, in the presence of predisposing factors like stagnation of blood, as can happen in left atrium in mitral stenosis, in right atrium in RV endomyocardial fibrosis, patients who are in atrial fibrillation in the left atrium, at LV apex associated with akinesia or dyskinesia of that part of the myocardium. So when you have these things and then you are seeing a mass, then you suspect that this could be a thrombus. If you are seeing a spontaneous echo contrast in that particular tumor, there are certain sites which are predisposed for thrombus formation, like left atrial appendage. When you see a mass in the left atrial appendage, you take it as a thrombus. At the sites of opening of the pulmonary veins, that's another location for thrombus formation. Apex of the LV, patent foramen ovale, mechanoprostatic valve, extension through IVC, as can happen when a patient with thrombus can extend from the IVC into the right atrium. The thrombus, as you rightly said, usually not pedunculated, they are side. If the patient had a history of embolic episode, then you are more sure that this is a thrombus. And the thrombus is extremely rare at the valve sites. It is rare because at the valve sites there is a regular blood flow, and when the blood is flowing at a reasonable velocity or a more frequent velocity than inside the chamber, the thrombus is rarely formed. So a mass on the valve or in the outflow region is unlikely to be a thrombus. So the thrombus is diagnosed by these points. One, is there a predisposing factor? Is there an evidence that there is a likelihood of thrombogenicity as can occur in spontaneous echo contrast? Is it occurring at a particular site? It is not pedunculated, but it is sessile. The patient had history of embolic episodes, and the valve site is avoided. If there is a mass in the valve site, it's very rare that it's a thrombus. It is mostly due to some other risk. So these points will help you to diagnose that this could be a thrombus. Large left atrial thrombus. This is a 62-year-old female, known patient with rheumatic heart disease, intermittent atrial fibrillation on oral anticoagulation, irregular follow-up in medications, admitted with acute brain infarct, MRI brain done suggestive of embolic infarct, echo done to look for cardiac source for embolus. And this is what is seen. A large mass, huge mass in the, it's a huge mass in the left atrium. Let us see in the next view. You can see huge mass. This is left atrium, you can see huge mass. Patient had associated mitral stenosis also. When you see a huge mass of this nature, what is the action that you plan? Any one of you? What should be your management strategy?
Start the patient on anticoagulation and surgery.
Yeah, very good. The patient should start from oral anticoagulation, and or it can give. It's better to give intravenous anticoagulation because if you are planning a surgery, you have to withdraw the medication. So if you are giving an oral anticoagulation, there is a risk that you may not be able to withdraw quickly. So it is better to give either intravenous heparin or low molecular weight heparin, which can be discontinued and patient can be quickly taken for surgery. That is what we did. Emergency cardiac thoracic consultation was taken and was advised early surgery for thrombus removal and mitral valve repair or mitral valve replacement. Coronary angiogram was done, followed by surgical intervention the next day. And LA was almost completely filled by thrombus. Thrombus removed, revealing an ulcerated lesion of the left atrial endocardium just above the annulus at 3 o'clock position. Ulcer was debrided and mitral valve replacement was done with 27 SJM bileaflet valve. The patient did very well. And here you can see after the thrombus has been removed, and this is the echo of the patient. This is the left atrium. This is the after mitral replacement. The tumor, the thrombus was completely removed. We thought it could be the ulceration may be the trigger which caused the large thrombus to be formed, or whether thrombus was formed and when the surgeon removed it, then ulcer was left behind. Anyhow, so patient did not develop any more complications. The patient had a smooth post. In a large thrombus, it is important that you should immediately take a corrective step, and if possible, surgical removal is required, especially if the patient requires valve replacement, as in a case of mitral stenosis, and both can be undertaken at the same sitting. Tell me what is this? This is, you might have seen it, symbol. What are you seeing?
So it's looks like cysts.
Cyst? No.
Ball valve thrombus.
Ball valve thrombus. It's ball valve thrombus in a patient with mitral stenosis. And what you are seeing is actually the thrombus can undergo degeneration. These are areas of degeneration. So it is not a cyst, it is actually multiple ball valve thrombus in a patient with mitral stenosis. So what is the treatment? What is the treatment? If you find this, what should be your approach?
It again is IV anticoagulation and a
Because,
surgery.
yes, I think it's a very, very serious situation, and there is a very likelihood that the thrombus can get fragmented and it can give embolics. So if facilities exist, patient is willing, and the patient should undergo surgical treatment and removal of the thrombus. So this is a ball valve thrombus in a patient with mitral stenosis and requires immediate surgical treatment. Left atrial appendage thrombus. Left atrial appendage is a very common site for thrombus formation, and the left atrial appendage can be. Can you visualize left atrial appendage in a transthoracic view?
Yes, sir.
Yes. How?
So we can do a short axis view. It will be visualized just before the anterior to the posterior to the pulmonary artery before we
Very
get
good.
the pulmonary artery. the
Do a
short
short
axis.
first. Do a short axis view at the level of the aortic valve, and then tilt it laterally and slightly posteriorly, and then you will be able to see the left atrial appendage. Okay. Any
So
other view?
even in apical four-chamber, we can
Yes.
see.
Appeal for chamber or sometimes even two chamber view.
Yes,
In
yes.
for chamber or two chamber view, you may be able to see the left atrial appendage. But the best method to look at the left atrial appendage is by doing a T, transesophageal echo. Anything where something is to be looked into the left atrium, you must always rely on transesophageal echo. The left atrium is a posterior structure, and many times an anterior interrogation, as in a transthoracic atrium. The left atrial abnormalities are best picked up by doing a transesophageal echo, where the heart is visualized from posteriorly. So here you can see the what are you seeing here? Any one of you?
So we can see the left atrial appendage, and there appears to be a thrombus.
Yes, this is the left atrial appendage, and there is a big thrombus inside the appendage. What is this structure? What do you see? Just
Sir, it is pulmonary.
No, this is that Comran ridge.
That's the ridge, right? But about that, what is this?
So it is pulmonary vein.
Which pulmonary vein?
It will be left.
Left.
uh,
Which one? Superior or inferior?
Inferior. Inferior.
No, it is left superior pulmonary.
Okay.
It is the left superior pulmonary vein, and sometimes you should be careful that the ridge which separates the left atrial appendage from the left superior pulmonary vein. There can be a slight thickening, and don't mistake this as a tumor walls. It can be. It is a normal phenomenon. So, but here you can easily see a tumor, thrombus. Very good. Sorry, not tumor, this thrombus. And this patient has got mitral regurgitation, and the patient is in normal sinus rhythm. And why did the patient develop a thrombus? Yes, patient has got mitral stenosis, mitral regurgitation, but the patient is in normal sinus rhythm.
Sir, even in a normal sinus rhythm, the patient with the mitral stenosis can develop because there's a stagnation of blood in the, especially in the left atrial appendage.
well.
And he might be having intermittent
Very
AF
good.
also.
That's the most important point. Yeah, that's what you should say. That's many of these patients can have paroxysms of atrial fibrillation, and a thrombus can be formed. Or how will you do? Or how will you find out whether the patient has got the risk of developing a
The size of the
thrombus?
left.
Velocity of the LA appendage.
Very good. Velocity of the left atrial appendage. What is the cutoff velocity which will tell you that the patient is unlikely to
More
develop a
than
thrombus?
20.
Ideally, it should be 20 is not enough. More than 50 is the most ideal. If it is 50 or above, then you are certain that's very good function. And if it is less than 20, then there is a risk that the thrombus formation is likely. By looking at the left, where do you keep the probe to detect the left atrial appendage velocity?
Just
At the mouth of the
mouth.
no, at the mouth of the left atrial appendage, and the velocity measurement can be done. And when after you have converted patients in atrial fibrillation to normal sinus rhythm, does the patient have got still a
Yes.
risk of
Yes.
developing thrombus formation?
Atrial stunning.
Why? Yes, atrial stunning. What do you mean by atrial stunning?
So the electrical activity has come, but the mechanically the atria is still not, the contractions are not good.
Actually, you should look at the atrial stunning. You should actually mostly concentrate on the left atrial appendage recovery, because even when the left atrial function has partly recovered, if the left atrial appendage function has not recovered, that patient can still develop a thrombus. What is the usual period of recovery time
4
for a
weeks.
stunned atrium? 4 weeks. And that patients who are on, who had just had one episode of atrial paroxysmal atrial fibrillation, you are cardioverted to normal sinus rhythm. The patient should at least be given oral anticoagulation for 4 to 6 weeks, and then you can evaluate the left atrial appendage velocity. And if everything is normal over a period of maybe 3 months, you may even consider whether anticoagulation can be discontinued. The left atrial appendage, the risk of developing a left atrial thrombus. What are the other features in the left atrium which can tell you there is high risk of left atrial thrombus formation?
So size.
Size. What to assess the size? What is the best parameter?
So ideally, volume should be taken.
Volume. Very good. Excellent. You have to look at the volume of the left atrium. What is the cut of volume?
34 ml per
Yes, very good. More than 34 ml per meter square body surface area indicates that the patient is having a higher dilated left atrium, risk of left atrial thrombus formation. Here, the left atrial appendage is the commonest region where there can be thrombus formation. It's an example of a patient. You can see, as you rightly said, this is the left atrial appendage from transthoracic examination,
Yes.
and you can see a mass here. There's a small clot in the left atrial appendage. So it is possible to sometimes pick the thrombus inside the left atrial appendage, but always rule out by doing a transesophageal echo. We actually did a transesophageal echo in this patient. Of course, this patient had thrombus, definitely large thrombi inside the much bigger thrombi compared to what you picked up in the thoracic echo. You can see thrombus in the left atrial appendage. You can see here, and you can also see there is a spontaneous echo contrast. So whenever you find a thrombus, you must always rely on the transesophageal echo. The transthoracic echo is useful, but I would still recommend transesophageal echo. What is the role of transesophageal echo in patients with recent atrial fibrillation? Or the patient has come with episode of acute atrial fibrillation.
Again, like if we do not know the time since it has started, before cardioversion, we should
Very
rule
good.
out.
So that's the most important point. The patient is coming with a new first episode of atrial fibrillation or a recent episode of atrial fibrillation. You have to first rule out that the patient, there is no thrombus in the left atrium, the body of the left atrium, as well as in the left atrial appendage. Then only you should resort to electrical cardioversion, because when you do an can get dislodged, then that can result in a disabling stroke. So it's always important to do a transesophageal echo, and then only do a electrical cardioversion. And for electrical cardioversion in a patient with atrial fibrillation, what is the electrical discharge that you use? What should be the electrical discharge? The voltage, the energy.
At least 100 joules.
100 joules
No.
for
It is recommended that it is better to use the maximum. That is in a biphasic defibrillator, 200 joules, and in a monophasic it can be up to 300. So it is better to give the maximum, because you don't want to take a chance. So it is better to give maximum current electrical discharge for the patient to be converted to normal sinus rhythm. And if the shock did not convert to normal sinus rhythm, what will you do?
We can give a drug. Sometimes the threshold patient can convert after giving
Very
like
good.
amiodarone.
Before that, you can give one more shock. Why do you want? What is the benefit of giving one more shock?
So the conversion maybe so.
Why? Conversion is higher. Why I am asking you, what is the explanation? Any one of you? When you give
amiodarone changes the threshold, myocardial threshold.
not myocardial threshold. Any one of you? What happens is that the second shock reduces the thoracic impedance. And once the current has passed through the thorax, the next current passes more easily, and there is a lower thoracic impedance. So ultimately, the current which is delivered, the shock which is delivered to the myocardium is higher. So you can try once more. One shock not converted, you give one more shock with the same current, and the viscosity delivered to the heart will be more, and there is a higher chance of conversion to normal sinus. And if it also fails, then as Navjot has rightly pointed out, we can give drugs and then give the shock. Okay, so that is atrial fibrillation with the thrombus in the left atrial appendage. Right atrial thrombus. This is the story of a 60-year-old female. She was diagnosed with right ventricular endomyocardial fibrosis. Right ventricular endomyocardial fibrosis can result in atrial fibrillation, huge right atrium, stagnation of blood in the right atrium, and they can form large thrombus. And here is an example. Patient had a huge thrombus in the right atrium. The inferior vena cava is completely distended. What is the normal pattern of inferior vena cava? What is the measurement, and how do you say it is normal?
It should be, sir, less than 21 mm, and there should be more than 50% variation in the
Are you
respiration.
sure 50% or?
More than 50%
10
respiration.
to 20% is the normal respiration.
No.
And during sniffing, more than 50%.
Very good. That is it. Usually the size is around 20 to 21 millimeters, and there will be respiratory variation. Normal quiet breathing, the variation is up to 20%, and when there is a sniffing, it is 50%. Normal breathing, it is not 50%. Normally, it is only 20%. During sniffing, you can have 50%. If you want to test it, then you can even ask the patient to teach the patient how to sniff, and then you can re-record during sniffing. But if in normal breathing, there is a 20% variation, it's not moving at all, indicating that the IVC and right atrial pressures are significantly elevated. So this is a huge mass. You can see that's a huge mass in the transistor. You can see the mass in the 3D. Mass in the right atrium is significantly enlarged. This mass is very huge actually. Very huge mass. This is a subsephoid view. This is a transesophageal view. You can see a large mass. Significant, very huge mass. These patients can develop recurrent pulmonary embolism. And you can see the tumor, the thrombus here. In a cardiac MRI, you can see the thrombus, the right atrium. You can see the RV apex obliteration. This is RV. This is the apex of the LV. This is the apex of the RV. And RV is completely, the apex is completely obliterated. And the right atrium is huge. And there's a thrombus in the right atrium. This is again, thrombus is seen as a filling defect. Large thrombus in the right atrium. LV thrombus, you must have seen plenty of LV thrombus. And what are the situations where you get LV thrombus?
It is akinetic segment.
Yes, which is the commonest location for an LV thrombus.
At the apex.
At the apex, when the apex becomes kinetic and there is a stagnation of blood. You know, the apex is the one which is farthest away from the normal flow of blood. The blood flows from the mitral valve and then flows out into the aortic valve. So usually the apex is farthest in the normal flow of blood. The blood comes into the left ventricle, and before it reaches the apex, it can be ejected into the aorta. So if the apex, normally when the apex also contracts, the blood is squeezed out. But if the apex is not contracting, then it's usually the blood in the region of the apex does not form part of the course of the blood flow, which flows from the left atrium to the mitral valve into the left ventricle, and from the left ventricle into the aorta. So the function of the apex is extremely important. That is why in patients with LV apical thrombus, you can see a thrombus here, another thrombus is found here. In region where there is a, actually there is a, this patient has got almost akinetic. Yeah, there is a suspicion there is some degree of contraction there, maybe hypokinesia, but then a thrombus is formed in these patients. Sometimes when you are finding a thrombus or a mass in the apex, you may have a doubt sometimes, and rarely, whether there is actually a thrombus or not, or is it an artifact. How can you make it out? Any test which will help you to diagnose whether it is a thrombus or not? Contrast echo, yes, very good. What is the contrast material that you use?
Normal saline.
Normal saline, usually you can get only a contrast in which chamber.
So there is some albumin labeled contrast.
Yes. When you are using agitated saline, you can get a good contrast onto the right side chambers, right atrium, right ventricle, because these bubbles usually do not cross through the pulmonary capillaries, and only very few of them reach the, very small quantity will reach the right side of the heart, and it may not opacified. But then you can have a contrast medium, albumin tagged contrast medium, which goes injected, and then you can see the contrast in the left side of the heart. Here is an example. See here, there's a tumor mass here, or not tumor mass, clot, and then your contrast is injected, and then you can see a good filling defect. So when you find that there is a good filling defect, and the contrast is filling the, as the contrast is filling the left ventricle in and around the apex, then you can be certain that there is a big thrombus there. So thrombus can be confirmed in doubtful cases by doing a albumin tagged contrast injection. Another example where we were not sure whether there is actually a thrombus or not, but we had a doubt whether there is a thrombus, and then we injected the contrast and we found that there is a filling defect, indicating that there is a small thrombus there, and the patient was given oral anticoagulation for a period of 3 months, and everything disappeared. So the contrast sometimes will help you to confirm as well as to detect in doubtful cases whether there is a left LV apical thrombus. So this is a good method to detect a thrombus in a suspected case of LV apical thrombus. What is the precaution that you should be careful about when you inject this albumin tagged contrast material? Some of the patients, very small percentage, can go for pulmonary edema. So you should be careful and you should be aware of that and must observe the patient sufficient time so that it does not develop a complication. Now coming to vegetations. How are vegetations recognized? How do you recognize a vegetation? Anyone of you?
One is that they have a mobility which is independent of the valvular. If it is on the wall, which is independent
Very
of
good.
the valvular
One.
mobility. And second is the location, sir, as you already pointed out, that they are on the
Very good.
upstream
Excellent.
portion of the walls in the present. And then if there are some predisposed suggests, so then again we can.
Very good. If the patient is having associated valve lesions or shunt lesions, and associated with that, you are finding a mass which is attached to the valve, especially on the upstream side of the valve, then you can suspect that this patient most likely is having a vegetation. Very good. Yes. So those are the points. It was in NB. So here is an example of a mitral vegetation on the left atrial side of the mitral valve in a patient with mitral vegetation. I'll show you some interesting vegetation. Sometimes vegetations can be very huge. Now, one important point you should remember is that when the patient is having a prosthetic valve, vegetations on the LA side of the prosthetic valve will not be detected in a transthoracic echo. That is because the transthoracic echo cannot pass through the mechanoprosthetic valve, and so these vegetations can be detected only by a transesophageal echo. Here is an example. This patient presented with fever who had undergone a valve replacement, and you can see the star Edwards valve, caged ball valve, and when doing a transthoracic echo, there was no indication that there is a vegetation. But when we did a transesophageal echo, we could easily pick up a vegetation, and the patient was given adequate antibiotic treatment. So it's extremely important. Running fever and it's come with and is having a mitral valve prosthesis, especially mechanoprosthetic prosthesis in the mitral position. You must always do a transesophageal echo and look for any vegetations on the left atrial side of the prosthetic valve. So it's extremely important to do transesophageal echo. Sometimes it can be very huge, by lengthwise or in size-wise. Here is an example of a patient who had a large vegetation. Whenever there is a large vegetation, what are the things that you should suspect? And what are the problems of a large vegetation?
So the large vegetation, they can embolize.
What is the cut-off mark for risk of embolization?
More than 1 centimeter.
More than 15 is definite. More than 10 millimeters also immediately increases the risk. So patients with large vegetations, especially more than 15 millimeters and occasionally more than 10 millimeters, there is higher risk of embolic episodes. And some people even consider that any patient with a vegetation more than 15 millimeters should undergo a surgical treatment of the valve. It should be surgically replaced.
They may be fungal, the pathogenesis, we have to rule out fungal infection also, and they usually don't respond to the medical treatment.
Very good, excellent. Whenever there is a large vegetation, especially rounded large vegetations, 15 millimeters and above, you should always suspect the possibility of a fungal infective endocarditis, which may not respond to the standard culture to detect fungal vegetations, fungal infective endocarditis. So whenever you find large infective endocarditis vegetations, 2 points. 1, there are risk of embolic episodes. 2, you should always rule out a possibility of fungal organism causing the infective endocarditis. Nowadays, we find fungal infective endocarditis more frequent. We have been doing a work on infective endocarditis. It may be because many of these patients dialysis, we have been finding fungal infective endocarditis, and they have got a lower resistance, high risk of developing infective endocarditis because when they undergo dialysis, some of them may have transient bacteremia, and there is a risk of developing infective endocarditis. So infective endocarditis we have been finding more frequently recently in some of the patients with on dialysis may not have a significant valvular disease, but they may develop infective endocarditis. Sometimes we have also found that it can be infective endarteritis, where the shunt is made, where the fistula is made for dialysis. There's another problem that we have been observing. Here is an example of a large infective endocarditis vegetation. Can you say what is this? Any comments? What is this? Is it a transthoracic or transesophageal? Transesophageal. Very good. Whenever you find that the atria are close to the transducer, it is transesophageal. When you find the ventricle is close to the transducer, it is transthoracic. That's the simplest method to quickly recognize. So here the atrium is close to the atrium is close to the transducer. So obviously it is a transesophageal echo. And what do you find there? What is this?
Pacemaker lead.
Very good. It's a pacemaker lead. And what are you finding here?
There is some vegetation attached to that lead.
Very good. It is a vegetation attached to a tricuspid valve. And the patient who has got a pacemaker lead across the tricuspid valve. Patient had mitral tricuspid regurgitation, and this was a vegetation patient presented with, and then we investigated and he found that he has got a vegetation in the tricuspid valve, and he was given proper treatment and he recovered completely. It was actually a Streptococcus viridans organism of Streptococcus viridans, and hence he was promptly treated and he recovered completely.
Excuse me, sir.
Oh.
The size appears to be more than 1 centimeter. So excision was
No,
done
we
or
didn't do
not
it.
required
If the patient
excision?
on treatment completely became asymptomatic, then we didn't bother to subject the patient for surgical treatment. What are the indications for surgery in the patient with infective endocarditis?
So patient resistant to the antibiotics.
First indication for surgery is
So one is
Embolic episode.
refractory
heart failure, not refractory, heart failure. Heart failure in a patient with infective endocarditis is the indication for surgical treatment, immediate surgical treatment, definite indication. Then other
Severe-
indications are evidence of
Severe regurgitation.
Embolic episode.
it should give rise to heart failure. Then only, otherwise severe regurgitation itself is not an indication. Or you should say that acute deterioration of regurgitation.
Any
But more importantly, then you already mentioned that evidence that the infection is not getting controlled. As
sir, increase in size of the vegetation if you on the serial echo, or there is fever which is not going, and there is systemic embolization which is happening. Despite
Actually, the heart failure is the most important indication. Then second is that there is evidence of the organism, the infection not be getting controlled, as evidenced by as you rightly said, when the vegetations are growing in size. Two, the systemic evidence of continuing infection as evidenced by fever, elevation of ESR, lethargy, patient deteriorate. The evidence of spreading of the infection as evidenced by perivalvular abscess formation.
Yes.
In and around aortic valve, there can be abscess formation, and that also is an indication for surgical intervention. Then third indication.
Prosthetic valve endocarditis.
Very good. When early prosthetic valve infective endocarditis, early prosthetic valve infective endocarditis is an indication for immediate valve replacement. And unstable prosthetic valve. The patient, the valve becomes prosthetic valve becomes unstable. That's the indication for valve replacement. Embolic episode, is it an indication for valve replacement?
If recurrent, then
Yes. One embolic episode is not an indication. Two or more. If there is embolic episodes 2 or more, that is an indication for valve replacement. And some people also recommend that if the 15 millimeters or more, that is also another indication for surgical treatment. Actually, surgical treatment has significantly brought down the mortality of infective endocarditis. If you look at the natural history of infective endocarditis, before antibiotics, infective endocarditis was associated with almost 100% mortality. With the use of antibiotics, infection got controlled and the mortality fell to around 25%. And with the availability and also the awareness that surgical treatment can help, and the mortality fell to 12 to 15%. So echocardiographic detection of vegetations, actually the mortality fell to around 12%. Still, the infective endocarditis is a disease with significant mortality, even though we have got a number of antibiotics for an effective treatment. So surgical treatment definitely played a part in reducing the mortality of infective endocarditis. Okay, right, yes. This is a case of VSD with infective endocarditis. You can see it's actually the vegetation is attached to the RV outflow. You can see a huge vegetation. Can you see that? It's a vegetation which is attached to RV outflow. What are the sites where you can have a vegetation in a patient with VSD? Any one of you? What are the sites where there can be a vegetation, infective endocarditis vegetation in a patient with VSD?
So where the jet strikes the endocardium, the VSD jet strikes the
Okay.
RV side of
The VSD jet, if it is going and striking the opposite wall of the RV, that can be a nidus for the infective endocarditis vegetation. 1, 2.
common restricted.
What are the sites where an infective endocarditis vegetation can be formed in a patient with VSD? Another site is on the RV side of the ventricular septal defect. At the site where there is the ventricular septal defect, on the RV side, there can be vegetation. And third location is on the septal leaflet of the tricuspid valve. If the jet is going and striking the septal leaflet of the tricuspid valve, and that also can be a nidus for thrombus, infective endocarditis vegetation. So there can be 3 locations. One, at the RV side of the defect. 2, opposite to the defect on the RV side. 3, the septal leaflet where there can be. In this patient, it seems to be on the RV side of the opposite side of the ventricular septal defect. Usually, infective endocarditis occurs in small to medium-sized VSD. Very large VSDs, you don't get infective endocarditis. Now, one of the prerequisites for infective endocarditis is a high-velocity jet. So you get a high-velocity jet in small to low medium-sized VSD, And these are the VSDs where there is the highest risk of developing infective endocarditis. Here is a patient with a large opposite side of the or RV opposite side, opposite to the VSD on the RV side, and it is actually falling into the RV outflow and also into the main pulmonary artery and back into the RV. So this is a infective endocarditis vegetation in a patient with VSD. So vegetation is mostly attached to valves or sites of abnormal jets. It varies in size and shape. Size mostly varies from 2 millimeters to 15 millimeters, rarely can be as long as 30 millimeters. Independent mobility, mostly associated with high velocity, aortic stenosis, ventricular septal defect, pathology of pulmonary stenosis. To be differentiated from lumbal excrescence. Lumbal excrescence are small projections which are seen attached to the commissure or the closure point of the aortic valve in all elderly people around the age, projections onto the LV side of the aortic valve, and these are known as lumbal excrescence, which are normal, and you should not make a diagnosis of infective endocarditis vegetation. But they do not have an independent mobility, and hence the diagnosis is not a problem. There are small projections onto the LV side of the aortic valve at the region where the aortic cusps come together. So these are the structures which may mimic aortic, the cardiac mass. Intracardiac mass, like dilated coronary sinus, sometimes can be mistaken as a mass in the left atrium. Crista terminalis, Chiari network, pacemaker wire, left ventricle, nodules or arrhenius. These are also normal structures seen at the site of closure line of the aortic valve in old people, like lumbal excrescence also. Redundant chordae, sometimes chordae may be redundant, and that may be mistaken for a vegetation. And myxomatous mitral valve sometimes confuse you. Here is an example of a crista terminalis mimicking a right atrial tumor. 38-year-old female came for preoperative cardiac checkup. No cardiac complaints. On examination, no cardiac abnormalities were detected. ECG X-ray just with the normal image, and echo revealed. It is not moving. Let me see how it should move. Let me see whether I can show you. Let me go to the original. It's very interesting. Oh, okay. Now you can see. Can you see something here? Can you see something here? Can you see the?
Yes,
No.
sir.
See the screen?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can you see something here?
Yes, sir. Something in RA.
RA
Yeah, what
towards the roof.
Yeah, what is it?
It's thrombus.
No, because she's a perfectly normal person, everything is normal signs to the young lady, and we are asymptomatic. We accidentally picked up. We are worried what is happening and what should be our approach. So we thought we should do we should try to find out what is really happening by doing a cardiac MRI. We did a cardiac MRI, and this is what we could get. And this also should move, but I'm not able. Next one is moving here, we can see. And when we did a cardiac MRI, this was the structure that we saw there. And this was actually the hypertrophied crista terminalis. What is crista terminalis? Now, George, would you like to give a comment about crista terminalis? What is it?
Sir, it is the portion which separates basically the muscle fibers sort of a thing, which separates the RA appendage from
Very
the
good. It's actually
RA
not appendage, a portion of the primitive atrium from the rest of the atrium. It's a little more than the appendage only, not only the appendage, but a portion of the right atrium is also included. So it is a muscular tissue which is hypertrophied, and it can mimic a tumor mass as in this lady. See? See, looking at the mass, we had a feeling whether it could be a small tumor mass, but luckily we did a cardiac MRI, and we found that it is only an hypertrophied crista terminalis, and the patient was reassured and underwent the surgical procedure. Everything went on well. So sometimes there can be a normal structure which may mimic a tumor. So this is the one example how a hypertrophic crystal terminalis may confuse you. Eustachian valve is another structure which can sometimes become larger and may confuse. Make a comment. What is an Eustachian valve?
It's the wall which connects the IVC to the RAC.
Yeah. IVC to RA, where which portion of RA?
It's the inferior portion only, so we are the almost near the coronary sign.
Not coronary sinus. It goes towards the patent foramen vein, which will actually helps the direct to direct the blood from the inferior vena cava across into the patent foramen vein, and that is how the blood can flow from IVC through the patent foramen vein onto the left atrium in the uterus, so that the oxygenated blood can see the oxygenated blood in the fetus actually is coming through the inferior vena cava. So hence it has to cross to the left atrium, left ventricle to reach the brain and other parts of the body as oxygenated blood. So sometimes it can become much larger, and sometimes may confuse you whether it is a tumor mass. So this is an example of a patient who had a large Eustachian valve, which may confuse you as a tumor mass. Sometimes Pons tendon. Sometimes you can see Pons tendon inside the LV, and it may get calcified. This is an example of a 66-year-old male who came with non-cardiac chest wall pain for 6 months. You see, there is a thick cord here. This actually is a calcified Pons tendon. Not very common. The Pons tendon to calcify is very uncommon. So we actually investigated him for any hyperparathyroidism. That was not. So this is an example of a calcified Pons tendon. Sometimes, as I told you, there can be loose chordae, which may confuse you. So here is an example of a loose chordae. It may be mistaken for an infective endocarditis vegetation. There can be real difficulty. Here, it is seen on the downstream side of the mitral valve. And it is, of course, it has got a mobility, but mobility is attached to the mitral leaflet. So this is a loose chordae. Sometimes loose chordae may confuse you as a tumor mass or a vegetation, and the associated findings should be looked into before you draw any conclusion. This patient did not have any other features, and hence finally we thought that this could be a loose chordae, and he did not have any symptoms. It's on follow-up. Pacemaker wire, did not elaborate on that. Sometimes they may confuse you that unless you know that there's a pacemaker wire, sometimes you may think that this may be a tumor mass, or you may think that it is a clot, or you may think that it's a vegetation. So you should now get all the information before you do an echocardiogram. A pacemaker wire can sometimes mimic all these things. Here it can mimic a tumor mass or even a infective endocarditis vegetation like picture, and you should be careful. Some very few interesting here. One example, see, here is a patient who came to us in the month of December because he had some leg pain. Then we found that he has got a false tendon. He has a false tendon. 3 months later, he came with an episode of acute non-cardiac chest wall pain, and we found that his false tendon has actually broken, and it is actually lying, floating in the left ventricle. It is attached to one end, but it is floating in the left ventricle. So unless we had done a previous echocardiogram, it would have been impossible for us to diagnose that this is a ruptured false tendon. But then, if it is not, then another possibility is a ruptured chordae. But here, since we have already seen a false tendon here about 3 months ago, like non-cardiac pain, and we found this piece of false tendon lying inside the LV cavity, floating around. We thought it could be most likely a ruptured false tendon. Very interesting. I never seen one. We concluded that it must likely be a ruptured false tendon because of the previous echo 3 months ago. An example of an intrathecal septal aneurysm, mostly seen in children. You can see this is an intrathecal septal aneurysm, which is bulging in both directions, depending upon the change in pressure. This was a case of hypoplastic right heart syndrome with a stenosis or hypoplastic tricuspid valve, hypoplastic right ventricle, and the patient had PDA and also had a large intrathecal septal aneurysm. Usually, patients with what is the common association of intrathecal septal aneurysm? Any one of you? Patent foramen vein. It's slightly a bigger one. Usually associated with
Thrombus.
Thrombus can happen, but more important is the intrathecal septal aneurysm is most frequently associated with an ASD. And one important thing you should remember is that more than 50% of the ASDs associated with intrathecal septal aneurysm close before the age of 1. So in a patient with an intrathecal septal aneurysm, if you have detected an ASD, you can wait till at least for a year or two and reassure the parents that there is a good likelihood that this can close. And more than 50% of patients with ASD in the can close spontaneously. This patient, I don't remember, this patient had ASD also, this patient had ASD, PDA. I don't remember whether I didn't have the follow-up of the patient, so I do not know whether the ASD was closed or not. So the intrahepatic septal aneurysm, immediately you should look for ASD. If there is an ASD, there is a good likelihood that it may spontaneously close. This may be difficult for you. I'm not showing that. Don't worry about it. Very difficult. Okay, this is a case. Don't worry about that case. So, what is the take-home message? What is the message that I would like to give you? Intracardiac masses can be tumors, thrombus, vegetations, cysts, or rarely granuloma. There have been reports that sometimes tuberculosis can cause granulomatous masses on the valves, and these are amenable to anti-tuberculosis treatment. There are a number of normal structures which can mimic intracardiac masses, common and primary tumors of the heart. Pericardial metastasis can cause cardiac tamponade. RV outflow tumors are most likely malignant. You should remember this statement very well. RV outflow tumors are most likely malignant, and hence, when you find an RV outflow tumor, the surgical treatment should be as quickly as possible. Tumor can be differentiated from thrombus with careful imaging and analysis, especially looking at the site where the mass is attached. In doubtful scenario, multimodality imaging is required. Especially, you can do a cardiac MRI in doubtful cases to find out whether it is a tumor or a clot, and also useful. So, with the available qualities of imaging, it is easy. You can easily diagnose the mass, and you can look at the tissue characterization and try to find out whether it is a mass, or whether it is a clot or a tumor mass. And sometimes even you can decide whether it is a malignant mass or not by looking at the tissue characterization, and also whether there are areas of degeneration inside the mass. I think that's all about the intracardiac masses and echocardiography. If you have got any doubt, you can ask now. Intracardiac masses in echocardiography is extremely important. You should be able to recognize, and also once you recognize, you should be able to differentiate what is the reason for a thrombus, what the reason for the mass. Is it a thrombus? Is it a tumor mass? Is it benign? Is it malignant? Are there secondaries? And also the vegetations, and also the normal structure. Any doubts?
Sir, for any cardiac masses after the transesophageal echo, which is the next
Cardiac MRI.
line?
You are not yet still confirmed, and if you have got a doubt, you should do cardiac MRI. But if it is a left atrial myxoma and all, sometimes even transesophageal echo may not be required. But if you are doing transesophageal echo, then it will provide all information required for the surgeon. But if there is a doubt about the character of the mass, you want to know more details, tissue characterization, then cardiac MRI is definitely useful. Okay, if there are no more doubts, I think it seems that we have made things more completely properly clear to you. So I think it's almost 9 o'clock now. So next week we will have a case discussion. We will alternate with case discussion. Next week we'll have a case discussion. I can definitely bring a case. If you have also a case with you, you please bring it so that we can discuss that case also. If you do not get one, I think I will bring the case and then we can have a discussion so that you really get trained, and also you will gain confidence to discuss the case in the examination. Okay, if there is no more doubts, I think we'll stop the session at this level. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And if you have got any doubts, you can still ask before we close.
With the MRI, can we in the congenital heart disease, can MRI be looking into multiple muscular VSDs? Is it a good modality for that?
Multiple muscular VSDs is difficult. Actually, for multiple muscular VSDs, you need an AV angiogram. Difficult sometimes because see, one of the reasons for in a tetralogy fellow you would like to do an angiogram is you are suspecting VSD in the muscular receptor. There, the other modalities of investigation you may miss it, and it's better to if you have got any doubt about the multiple VSDs, I think you should do an angiogram, LV angiogram. Okay, so next week we'll have a case discussion, and then we'll decide what we should do week after that. Same time, we'll meet you on next Friday. Okay, bye. Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Good night. Bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye. Bye. Ronak, are you there, or your representative is there?
No, sir. Nobody is here. Tell me.
No, there's nothing. And I just trying to find out whether next week also it is the same link that I have to use or not.
I guess Jinoy will get in touch.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.